Pilot refused to fly with the 11-year-old co-pilot until she said, "I need to save the school kids." Captain Mason Hale had flown through wars, wildfires, and storms that could shake the confidence out of any pilot alive. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the sight waiting for him that icy Montana morning. The hangar doors groaned open, letting in a blast of winter wind. Snowflakes blew sideways like tiny white knives. Mason trudged toward the small rescue aircraft, coffee in hand, mentally preparing for what he assumed would be a routine supply run. Then he stopped. There, sitting in the co-pilot's seat, legs dangling because they didn't reach the floor, was a child. Not a teenager. Not a trainee. An 11-year-old girl, wearing an oversized headset and a bright orange safety vest that swallowed her entire torso. She swiveled in the seat with the confidence of someone who had been flying for decades, even though her feet barely brushed the rudder pedals. Mason blinked twice. "You've got to be kidding me." The operations officer, a tired-looking man named Lewis, stepped out from behind the aircraft and winced. He knew exactly what was coming. "Morning, Captain," Lewis said carefully. Mason pointed directly at the girl. "What is that?" Lewis sighed. "That is your co-pilot." Mason stared at him. Then he stared at the girl again. She gave him a shy but firm little nod, like she had practiced professional greetings in a mirror. "My name's Emma Lane," she said. "I'll be assisting you today." Mason's jaw dropped. "Assisting me? Kid, you should be in math class." "I already finished today's assignments online," she replied calmly. "Fractions." Lewis rubbed his temples. "Captain, she's been authorized." "Authorized?" Mason snapped. "By who? The Tooth Fairy? That is an 11-year-old child sitting in a federal aircraft." Emma didn't flinch. She held her tablet against her chest like a shield, but Mason could see her knuckles turning white. He turned to Lewis again. "This is a joke. Tell me this is a joke." "I promise you it's not," Lewis said. "Her father signed off. The regional officer signed off. She's had simulator training, and—" "I am not," Mason said sharply, "flying with a child, no matter who signed what." Emma looked down for a moment, but instead of shrinking, she stepped off the co-pilot's seat, walked directly up to Mason, and held out her tablet. Her hand trembled, but her voice was steady. "Captain Hale," she said, "we don't have time for this. The school kids need us." Mason paused. "What school kids?" Emma tapped her tablet. A storm radar image filled the screen, an angry, swirling mass of red and purple tearing across the Bitterroot Range like a beast awakening. "This system arrived earlier than predicted," she explained. "A school bus returning from the winter retreat got caught on Highway 93. They radioed distress signals at 6:17 a.m., but lost contact 13 minutes later." Mason frowned at the image. The storm was moving fast, too fast. Emma zoomed in. "Dad's the operations dispatcher today. He got partial coordinates before the bus went dark. The rescue team is stuck on the opposite side of a washout. The only way to get them the thermal kits, medical packs, and the beacon relay is by air." She looked up at Mason, eyes sharp and pleading. "That's why we have to take off now." Mason raised an eyebrow. "And why you?" Emma swallowed. "Because I know this route better than anyone else Dad could call, better than most adults." That sounded like a child exaggerating, until she pulled up a detailed mountain flight path, complete with wind drift predictions, terrain pressure zones, and emergency descent points. All annotated. By hand. Mason's breath hitched. "Where did you learn all this?" Emma's expression softened, sadness flickering over her face like a passing shadow. "My mom," she whispered. "She was a bush pilot. She flew rescue missions on these mountains for years. She died last winter." She hesitated before continuing. "I study her logs every night. I know her old routes better than anyone. The one the rescue team needs you to fly today, that's her route. A cold silence settled over the hangar. Mason had heard the story, everyone had, a freak downdraft, a sudden ice burst, a brilliant pilot gone in seconds. Emma's mother had been legendary. And now her daughter stood here, clutching a tablet full of her mother's handwriting and calculations. "I'm not trying to be a pilot today," Emma said softly. "I'm trying to save those kids. I wouldn't ask to fly if it wasn't life or death." Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. Mason looked at Lewis. Lewis looked at the ground and didn't argue. The storm radar was real, the timing was real, the danger was real. And the only thing standing between those trapped children and a freezing death was the cargo in Mason's aircraft. Emma stepped closer. "You don't have to trust me, just trust the data, trust my mom's route." Mason took a long breath. 11 years old. A child. But a child speaking with the weight of someone who had lost more than most adults ever would. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "If you come with me," he said, "you follow every command I give, no exceptions." Emma nodded instantly. "Yes, sir." "And you don't touch a single control unless I say so." "Understood." "And if I tell you to strap in and stay silent, you do it. Clear?" "Yes, sir." Mason stared at her one more time, searching her face for any sign of fear or uncertainty. But all he saw was determination, a fierce, quiet fire that reminded him of pilots twice her age. He sighed. "Fine," he said at last, "strap in." Emma scrambled back into the co-pilot seat, tightening her harness with practiced hands. Lewis exhaled in relief. Mason stepped into the cockpit, settling into his familiar chair. He didn't know if he was making the right decision. But as he glanced at the radar, the storm, the coordinates, and at Emma's steady profile, he knew one thing for certain. They were running out of time. And sometimes the sky didn't wait for permission. It only waited for courage. Captain Mason Hale's hands tightened on the yoke as the engines roared to life. The familiar vibrations under his palms should have been comforting, but they were. Not today. Not with an 11-year-old sitting beside him, holding the weight of a rescue mission on her small shoulders. Engines at full thrust, flap set. Mason barked, double-checking the gauges. Emma's eyes never left the radar display. All systems green. Route confirmed. Wind shear along the first ridge, but it's manageable if we climb 30 feet higher before the pass. Mason's brows knitted together. 30 feet. That was tight, dangerously tight in this storm-prone corridor. But the girl's voice had a calm authority that made it almost impossible to doubt her. Almost. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, trying to keep his nerves in check. "My mom," Emma said softly. "She trained me. She said the mountains don't forgive mistakes and the sky doesn't care about your age." Mason swallowed hard. He had seen experienced pilots make errors on this route and pay for it. And here was a child, sitting beside him, ready to navigate treacherous weather patterns and deadly cliffs. "Okay," Mason muttered. "We take off, but you follow my instructions to the letter." "Yes, sir." The aircraft began its slow, rumbling taxi across the frozen tarmac. Snowflakes whipped past the nose like a hail of tiny arrows. Mason glanced sideways at Emma. Her small hands were wrapped around the tablet, fingers flying over the digital map as if it were part of her body. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, lips pressed together, jaw tight. The hangar disappeared behind them. The mountains rose like jagged teeth in front, and the sky above was a violent shade of gray, alive with swirling clouds. Mason could feel the storm breathing, ready to strike. "Approaching first ridge," Emma said. "Wind gusts reaching 48 knots. Elevation gain recommended, 20 feet above standard clearance. Ice potential on leading edges." Mason adjusted the yoke. The aircraft shuddered as it met the gusts head-on. He glanced at Emma, half expecting fear, but saw none, Only focus, only determination. Calculating turbulence drift, she murmured. Numbers flew across her tablet. Hold heading 320, correction in 5 seconds, turbulence mitigating, ready for climb. Mason's hands followed her instructions. The plane obeyed, slicing through the gusts, bouncing, rattling, but staying on course. He couldn't help but marvel. She was right. Every correction, saved them from disaster. Emma, if you were an adult, you'd be the best co-pilot I've ever flown with, he admitted quietly, his voice barely audible over the engines. She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes scanned the radar. We have 22 minutes before the storm fully engulfs Clearwater Pass, she said, voice steady but tight. If we lose altitude now, the bus could freeze. If we climb too high, turbulence will cripple us. Time is critical. Mason's stomach clenched. 22 minutes wasn't much, especially when the storm was unpredictable, merciless, and growing by the second. Storm intensity rising, she continued. Precipitation shifting west, heavy icing forming, alternate route prepared, coordinates input into GPS. I've memorized emergency landing zones. Strip near the ranger station has 600 feet clearance. It's tight, but we can land if necessary. Mason exhaled sharply. You memorized all this, all of it. Emma gave a faint nod. Yes, sir. I've been practicing the same route my mom used for emergencies. Every contour of the mountains, every wind shift, every ridge line. The engines howled louder as gusts slammed the plane sideways. Snow whipped across the windshield. Mason felt a twinge of fear, but then he remembered the child beside him. Emma, you're unbelievable, he muttered, a hint of awe in his voice. How can someone 11 years old know this? Emma's lips curved slightly into a grim smile. I don't have a choice. If I can't do this, the kids might not make it. Mason looked out at the storm again. The dark clouds churned, lightning flashing across the mountains. Visibility was dropping fast. The road below, where a small school bus carried 22 children, was buried in snow and ice. Route recalculated, Emma said. We need to make the pass in the next 8 minutes to stay ahead of the snow. I'll guide you over the ridge. 8 minutes, Mason's throat tightened. Are you sure? Yes, sir. I've simulated it in the program. If we follow my instructions, we can make it. Mason tightened his grip on the yoke. The plane jolted violently as a gust hit them side-on, nearly tipping the aircraft. He muttered a curse under his breath, but Emma's calm voice cut through the chaos. Adjust bank 3 degrees left, correcting turbulence steady. The plane obeyed like it had a mind of its own. Mason's mouth went dry. He had been flying for over 25 years, but he had never seen anyone, child or adult, handle this with such precision. Hold altitude, she said. Leading edges iced up. Ice is 1.7 inches thick on the left wing. We need to maintain speed of 130 knots to prevent stall. Mason followed every instruction. He couldn't afford doubt. Not here, not now. Lives were on the line. Lightning cracked through the clouds, illuminating Emma's determined face. Snow whipped across the cockpit, rattling the windows. Mason felt the plane shiver under him, but she remained steady, calm, focused. Clearwater Pass ahead, she said. Prepare for microburst turbulence. I'll call corrections. Mason took a deep breath. Ready when you are. Left bank 1.5 degrees. Increase climb by 10 feet. Hold. The aircraft responded. Mason realized something shocking. The child beside him wasn't just guiding him. She was saving the mission. Every calculation, every prediction was keeping the plane alive and keeping the children below alive as well. Minutes passed like hours. The storm screamed around them. Mason's mind raced with possibilities, failures, worst-case scenarios. But Emma didn't waver. She read the radar, read the wind, read the plane. She anticipated turbulence before it even hit. And Mason realized, for the first time in decades of flying, that maybe courage and skill didn't come with age. Maybe it came with purpose. Emma glanced at him. Next ridge, sir. We either make it or we divert to the ranger strip. I'll guide you either way. Mason swallowed. I trust you. Emma's eyes flickered. Thank you, sir. Let's save the kids. And with that, the plane surged into the storm, carrying 2 pilots, one seasoned, one 11 years old, and the hope of 22 school children trapped below. The Bitterroot Mountains rose like jagged teeth beneath them, shrouded in storm clouds so thick they could barely see a ridge ahead. Mason Hale's knuckles whitened around the yoke. He had flown countless emergencies, but nothing had prepared him for flying through a living storm with an 11-year-old guiding him like a veteran. Emma Lane's eyes darted between the radar and the altimeter. Wind shear is increasing. Left wing is accumulating ice. We need to reduce climb by 5 feet and adjust heading 325. Mason swallowed and followed her instructions. The aircraft trembled violently as gusts slammed them from the side. Snow hammered the windshield, blurring visibility. Lightning forked above, illuminating the mountains in stark white flashes. The roar of the engines was deafening. Next ridge coming up fast, Emma said. We have 10 seconds before the gust pocket hits. Bank 2 degrees right. Mason reacted instinctively. The plane tilted, ice scraping along the wings, while a sudden updraft lifted the nose dangerously. He gritted his teeth, feeling the aircraft shudder, but Emma remained calm, her small hands hovering over the tablet like a conductor guiding an orchestra. You're incredible, Mason muttered under his breath. How are you so calm? Emma didn't look at him. Because the kids can't afford panic. I can't afford panic. Her voice was steady, but he noticed a slight tremor in her fingers, a child's hands controlling the fate of dozens. The wind howled like a living thing, pushing them closer to the mountainside. Mason's stomach twisted. He had flown in military convoys, wildfires, blizzards, and tornado aftermaths, but nothing had ever felt this personal. The lives of innocent children hung beneath them, and the only person guiding them through hell was a child. Hold altitude, Emma instructed. Microbursts ahead. We'll lose lift if we don't adjust pitch by 1.8 degrees now. Mason did as she said. The plane lurched violently. Snow and ice scratched the fuselage. He swallowed hard. He was a pilot, trained for emergencies, yet he was following an 11-year-old's commands to survive. Storms forming a vortex, Emma continued, her voice calm but urgent. Left wing icing critical. Activate de-icing now. I'll monitor. Don't adjust throttle unless I tell you. Mason flipped the switches. Heat hissed through the wings. He glanced sideways at her. Her eyes were locked on the radar, reading numbers, wind speeds, altitude shifts, and terrain lines at once. Every second mattered. Every calculation could save or doom them. Good, we're stable for 30 seconds, Emma said. Next ridge in 6. 6 seconds stretched into eternity. Mason tightened his grip, watching the mountains approach faster than the eye could track. The plane hit the gust pocket. The nose dipped, and the aircraft shuddered violently. Hard right, Emma yelled. Mason banked sharply, just clearing a cliff edge by mere yards. Snow exploded from jagged rocks, whipping past the cockpit. Mason's heart thundered. He looked at her. Small, fragile, perfect, and terrifyingly precise. You see that? He asked. You just saved us by inches. Emma's lips twitched into the faintest smile. I told you, sir. Mountains don't forgive mistakes. They leveled off briefly. Mason's ears were ringing from adrenaline. His eyes, dry from stress, darted to Emma again. How are you doing this? No simulator can prepare a kid for this. Emma's gaze flicked to him. I study real missions. I study every scenario my mom faced. She always said the sky is honest. You get no second chances. You have to anticipate. Mason exhaled slowly. Anticipate. That's what she had been doing all along. Anticipate danger, predict movement, act decisively. A child could not be this precise unless she had extraordinary training and extraordinary courage. Suddenly, a shudder ran through the aircraft. Mason's stomach lurched. Engine 2's output dropping. Emma scanned the systems immediately. Right turbine is overheating. We need to reduce thrust by 10%. I've recalculated route adjustments. Reduce climb by 20 feet to balance airflow. Mason followed her instructions, holding the plane steady as the storm seemed to pull them into a vortex. Snow streaked past the cockpit like a white blur. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Emma's focused face. He saw the tight set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, and the weight of her mission pressing down on her shoulders. "Route correction in 3, 2, 1, she called. Mason banked the plane, narrowly avoiding a ridge. The propellers whined in protest. He looked at Emma, incredulous. "You are terrifyingly good at this." Emma swallowed. "I can't afford mistakes. The bus, the kids," her voice trailed, but her eyes never left the radar. Mason's mind raced. They were deep in the storm, engines under strain, ice forming on the wings, microbursts ripping through the valleys, and yet she guided him with the confidence of a seasoned co-pilot, not a child. Minutes later, a fresh gust nearly sent the plane into a dip. Mason cursed under his breath, gripping the yoke for dear life. "Emma, now." She barked instructions, correcting pitch, banking, and adjusting thrust. They narrowly passed through a sudden updraft, the aircraft scraping close enough to the ridge for Mason to feel the cold radiating from the rock face. He exhaled slowly, glancing at Emma. "I'm not sure I'll ever see anyone fly like this ever again." She gave a faint nod. "We're not done yet. There's another ridge and then the valley. We need perfect alignment to reach the emergency strip. If we miscalculate, we lose the window to rescue the bus." Mason's stomach dropped. Window. He realized just how critical every decision was. Every second mattered. Lives hung in the balance. Emma leaned closer to her tablet. "Altitude steady. Heading 330. Ice cleared from the wings. We'll reach the pass in 30 seconds if we maintain this vector." Mason tightened his jaw. 30 seconds. 30 seconds to clear the ridge, survive the storm, and deliver the rescue supplies to the stranded team and children. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Emma's small hand hovered over the tablet. "Yes, sir. Let's save them." The plane surged forward, piercing through the final wall of gray clouds. Lightning cracked overhead, snow whirled like a living white curtain, and the Bitterroot Mountains loomed ahead. Mason Hale, veteran of countless emergencies, felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear and awe. But he also felt hope. Because the child beside him was not just guiding the aircraft, she was saving lives, and Mason knew they were running out of time. The storm was fierce. The mountains were merciless. And somewhere below, a school bus waited, trapped and terrified, counting on two pilots who were, against all odds, perfectly matched. One seasoned, one 11 years old, united by courage, purpose, and the urgency of a life-or-death mission. The storm thickened as they approached the upper ridges of the Bitterroot Range. Snow streaked across the windshield in chaotic white sheets, and gusts slammed the aircraft from all sides. Mason Hale gritted his teeth, fingers straining on the yoke. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but he couldn't. Not when the lives of 22 hung below, frozen in a bus trapped on a mountain pass. Emma Lane, small but unyielding, leaned over her tablet, eyes scanning radar and GPS coordinates simultaneously. "Microbursts ahead," she warned. "We need to adjust altitude immediately, or we risk losing lift entirely." Mason followed her instructions, climbing sharply as icy gusts threatened to rip the aircraft off course. A sudden downdraft slammed into them, rattling the fuselage violently. Snow pelted the cockpit windows, and lightning flashed so close it illuminated the ice forming along the wings. Mason could feel the aircraft shudder beneath him. "How are we even alive?" he muttered, awed. Emma didn't flinch. "Hold steady, sir. Turbulence is peaking at 25,000 feet, but our trajectory is clear. I've calculated the wind drift, trust me." Mason swallowed hard. "You make it sound so simple." She glanced at him, her eyes sharp and unwavering. It's not simple, but panic won't save anyone. Precision will. A bolt of lightning cracked the sky directly ahead, illuminating a ridge that seemed impossibly close. Mason instinctively banked left, the plane grazing perilously close to the jagged rock face. "Emma," he shouted, "we're cutting it too close." "Correction," she replied without hesitation. "Reduce pitch 2 degrees. Hold bank at 1.8 right. We'll clear it by inches." The plane obeyed like a living extension of her will. Mason felt the icy air whip past the fuselage as snow exploded from the cliffside. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to pull up, but he followed her instructions, trusting the calculations of an 11-year-old. "Storm pressure increasing exponentially," Emma continued. "Left wing ice thickening, activate de-icing now. We can't afford a stall here." Mason flipped the switch. Steam hissed across the wings, but the plane trembled, still buffeted by the microbursts. He looked at her in astonishment. "You're not just brave, you're terrifyingly accurate." Emma swallowed hard but remained focused. "I can't let the kids freeze, sir. I've studied every ridge, every gust, every dangerous point on this route. My mom taught me to anticipate, to predict. I can see the wind patterns before they hit us." Minutes passed like hours. The plane rattled violently as the storm twisted and turned around them. Mason could feel the weight of every decision. They weren't just battling the storm, they were racing against time. Every second counted, every maneuver mattered. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the children below could be lost. "Prepare for the pass," Emma said. "We have one shot at this. I've mapped the corridor precisely. Hold altitude and heading exactly 330. Microbursts hit in 543. Mason adjusted the yoke. The plane surged forward as a wall of wind struck them. The nose pitched violently and the left wing scraped against ice-laden air. He gritted his teeth. The turbulence was unlike anything he had flown before. It was alive, unpredictable, and merciless. "Correcting bank 2 degrees left. Climb 5 feet. Reduce throttle 3%, Emma instructed, her fingers flying over the tablet like she was conducting an orchestra. The aircraft responded, the turbulence barely nudging it off course. Mason exhaled sharply, his heartbeat pounding. "Incredible," he muttered. "I've flown for decades, and I've never seen anyone handle a storm like this." Emma didn't respond immediately. She was focused, calculating, anticipating the next gust. Mason realized something profound. The child beside him wasn't just courageous. She was skilled beyond her years. Every decision was precise, measured, and life-saving. Suddenly the plane shuddered violently. Mason's stomach lurched. "What now?" he shouted. "Right turbine output dropping, overheating. Reduce climb by 10 feet. Adjust bank 0.9 degrees right," Emma said calmly. Mason obeyed instantly. The plane leaned, tilted, and stabilized, ice crackling along the wings. He looked at her, stunned. "You see this, and it doesn't even faze you." Emma's eyes flicked to him. "Fear won't help anyone survive, sir. Only decisions do, only action." The storm was relentless. Snow whipped around them, ice accumulated on the fuselage, and visibility dropped to mere feet. Mason had faced emergencies that would break lesser pilots, but even he was shaking. "Valley below in sight," Emma said. "We're approaching the final ridge before the emergency strip. Wind shear is critical, bank 3 degrees right. Reduce climb 2%. I'll guide you in." Mason's jaw tightened. This was it. One last ridge, one last chance to align with the emergency landing strip, and they could reach the stranded rescue team and the school bus. The plane hit the gust with a violent jolt. Mason struggled to keep it level, but Emma's voice cut through the chaos. "Correct, adjust bank 1.5 degrees left, throttle up 3%, hold altitude." The aircraft responded, skimming the edge of a cliff. Mason could feel the air pressure shift, snow blasting against the windshield like white fire. He exhaled slowly, glancing at Emma. Small, fragile, 11 years old, and somehow holding the lives of dozens in her hands. "You're doing it," Mason whispered. "You're keeping us alive." Emma's fingers danced over the tablet. "We're not done. Final corrections. Align with strip at 35 degrees, heading 335. Don't deviate, sir. Even a small mistake will cost lives." Mason gritted his teeth, following her exact instructions. The emergency strip came into view, a narrow, icy clearing barely visible through the storm. It was risky, almost impossible, but Emma had calculated it to perfection. "Brace yourself," she said. "We're landing, hold steady. I've timed the gusts, the turbulence, the icing, this is it." Mason's hands shook as he guided the plane into position. Every movement had to be precise. One wrong tilt, one misjudged gust, and the aircraft could spin out, crash into the ridge, or slide off the ice. Emma's voice was calm, almost serene. "Throttle down slowly, nose level, keep wings steady, adjust right rudder slightly. Touchdown in 3, 2, 1. The aircraft hit the snow-covered strip with a jolt, skidding slightly but staying on course. Mason exhaled in relief, glancing at Emma. She had done it. We made it," he said, awe in his voice. Emma nodded, still scanning the radar. "We've cleared the ridge, sir. The bus and the rescue team are next. We just need to deliver the gear safely." Mason leaned back, heart racing. He had just flown through a storm worse than any he had encountered in his decades of flying, and he had followed an 11-year-old's commands every step of the way. And somehow, against all odds, they were alive. But the mission was far from over. Below in the snow-choked valley, children waited, and Emma Lane, small but indomitable, was ready to lead them to safety. The emergency strip appeared through the storm like a narrow ribbon of hope, half buried under ice and snow. Mason Hale's stomach knotted as he eyed the icy landing zone. It was barely visible, uneven, and frozen solid, dangerous by any standard. He had flown in worse weather, but this was a child's calculation guiding him through life-or-death territory. And yet the girl beside him, Emma Lane, seemed unshakable. "Final approach," Emma said, her voice calm but firm. "Throttle steady, nose level, maintain, heading 335. I've timed the gusts. We hit the least turbulent corridor now." Mason adjusted the yoke. The aircraft shuddered violently as a gust slammed it sideways. Snow exploded across the windshield like a wall of white fire. His knuckles whitened as he held steady. "Reduce speed 5 knots. Adjust left rudder slightly," Emma instructed. Mason followed, feeling the plane respond almost instinctively to her commands. The emergency strip was treacherous. Icy patches glimmered like glass, and the edges dropped into snow-laden ravines. Mason's heart pounded as he lined up the wheels. A slip, a miscalculation, and they could plunge into the valley, miles from the stranded bus. "Hold altitude for 1 more second," Emma said. "We need the wind to shift a degree now." Mason felt the aircraft tilt, barely clearing a ridge. Then, under Emma's precise guidance, the plane touched down. The landing gear groaned, ice scraping under the fuselage, but it held. Mason exhaled sharply. He glanced at Emma, who was already scanning radar for the next critical step. "We're on the strip, sir," she said. "Gear is secure. We can deliver the packages now. Follow my instructions exactly, and we'll reach the bus before the storm traps it completely." Mason nodded. He knew they weren't out of danger. Not yet. Every gust, every drift, every inch mattered. Emma directed him to taxi slowly along the icy strip, her eyes calculating every slope, dip, and icy patch. "Reduce speed 10 knots. Right wing clearance 2 feet. Watch the drift from gusts 35 knots. Steady." The aircraft obeyed, sliding carefully along the frozen ground. Mason marveled at her ability to anticipate every movement. The girl beside him wasn't just guiding him. She was orchestrating a rescue mission with uncanny precision. Finally, the strip leveled out near a clearing where the bus had gone silent hours earlier. Mason squinted through the swirling snow. The bus was partially buried in ice, surrounded by snowdrifts and frozen trees. The rescue team, trapped by the storm, had been unable to reach it on foot. "Gear drop point ahead," Emma said, pointing at the tablet. "We'll taxi to this clearing and drop the thermal kits, beacon, and medical packs for them to retrieve. Timing is critical. They won't have much visibility." Mason adjusted the aircraft carefully. Every movement had to be precise. Snow drifted across the strip, gusting violently, and ice scraped under the wheels. The plane slid slightly, but Emma's voice guided him. "3 feet to the left, hold, now straighten, perfect. Drop point aligned." Mason engaged the release mechanism. Packages slid carefully down a chute to the snow below. Emma watched the delivery coordinates closely on her tablet. "They're in range. The team can retrieve them safely." Suddenly, a gust slammed the plane sideways. Mason swore under his breath. The aircraft leaned dangerously close to tipping, but Emma's calm instructions cut through the chaos. "Correct with rudder 3 degrees right. Reduce climb 5 feet." The plane righted. Mason exhaled. He glanced at her, realizing something profound. Without her, they wouldn't have made it this far. She was saving lives with every command. "Rescue team visual," Emma said. "They've spotted the gear. Start guiding the bus to the clearing. I've plotted the safest path." Mason nodded. He understood. The school bus was stranded, children inside, scared and freezing. The rescue team would have to navigate snow, ice, and the storm, but the gear they dropped could make the difference between life and death. "Visibility is dropping fast," Emma continued. "They have exactly 10 minutes before the snow covers the path. Keep engines steady and maintain heading. I'll monitor radar for sudden gusts." Mason followed her instructions to the letter. The aircraft shuddered as the storm intensified, but they stayed on course. Emma's calm, precise guidance made the difference. The plane moved like a living instrument, responding to her every calculation. "Bus located," Emma shouted suddenly. 22 children on board. They're scared but unharmed. The road is partially blocked, but the team is directing them along the cleared path to the strip. Keep engines steady. Don't let the gusts push you." Mason felt a rush of adrenaline and relief. The children were alive. He glanced at Emma. She wasn't celebrating. She was still focused, monitoring every gust, every slope, every potential hazard. "Prepare for final clearance," she said. "The team is signaling for the remaining packages. After that, we head back to base. Maintain heading 338 and adjust for wind drift." Mason followed her instructions. Snow whipped across the windshield, visibility dropping further, but the plane remained steady. Every second mattered. One slip, one miscalculation, and the mission could fail. "Gear retrieved," Emma said, her voice calm but urgent. "They have the beacon and thermal kits. The bus is moving. They're following my mapped route." Mason exhaled. Finally, a glimmer of relief. The children were moving. The rescue team had the supplies. The storm still raged, but hope had returned. Emma leaned back slightly. "We did it, sir. The kids are safe. Now we get back before the storm intensifies again." Mason shook his head in awe. "I've flown decades, but I've never flown with someone like you. You just saved lives today. You're 11 and you just managed the impossible." Emma smiled faintly. "I just did what I had to do. My mom would done the same." The aircraft slowly turned, leaving the emergency strip behind. The storm still raged, but Mason felt a quiet pride and respect for the girl beside him. She had guided him through near-impossible conditions, led the rescue, and ensured the children survived. As they climbed back into the safer layers of the storm, Mason realized something profound. Courage wasn't measured in age. And sometimes, the smallest hands carried the heaviest burdens and bore them with extraordinary skill. The storm had eased slightly as Mason Hale guided the aircraft away from the emergency strip, but the Bitterroot Mountains were still a living, unpredictable wall of snow and ice. Emma Lane, small and steady in the co-pilot seat, had already shifted her focus to the return journey. The children were safe for now, but the storm wasn't done with them, or with the rescue plane. "Engines holding steady?" Emma asked, eyes scanning gauges and radar simultaneously. "Yes," Mason replied, his voice tense, "but the air is still unstable. Those microbursts will push us off course if we're not careful." Emma nodded. "I've recalculated. Keep altitude at 23,000 feet, heading 340. Gusts from the west will hit in 90 seconds. I'll time the corrections." Mason swallowed hard. Every nerve in his body screamed alert. The plane had barely survived the initial storm. Any mistake now could be fatal. And yet, the child beside him exuded a calm he had never experienced in decades of flying. The first gust hit hard. The aircraft shuddered violently, yanking the yoke from Mason's hand slightly. He countered instinctively, but Emma's voice cut through the roar of engines and wind. "Correct hard left rudder 2 degrees, pitch 1.5 up." The plane responded, wobbling, tilting dangerously, but then righting itself. Mason exhaled sharply, glancing at Emma. Her small hands hovered over the tablet, guiding them through turbulence like a seasoned pilot. "You really do anticipate everything," he said in awe. "How do you see it before it hits?" Emma's eyes never left the radar. "I study the wind patterns, terrain, and air density. Mom taught me to read the mountains and the storm together. It's a conversation. You have to anticipate or it kills you." Mason nodded, realizing how true it was. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes, and the storm, wild, powerful, and unpredictable, was a relentless adversary. But Emma was holding her own, every calculation precise, every life-saving. "Left wing icing forming again," she said. "Activate de-icing, maintain heading. Gusts in 30 seconds, adjust bank 2 degrees right." Mason flipped the switches, watching the wings hiss as heat cleared the ice. The aircraft trembled violently as gusts slammed into them. Snow streaked the windshield like white fire. He clenched the yoke, trusting Emma's commands. The storm intensified further. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the mountains like jagged teeth in the gray-white chaos. Mason felt sweat bead on his forehead. This was no ordinary rescue. Every second counted. One misstep, one slip, and the aircraft could spin out, taking both of them into a frozen death. "Next ridge approaching," Emma said. "Microbursts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Correct now." Mason obeyed instantly. The plane tilted violently as icy gusts tried to shove it sideways. He fought to stabilize the aircraft, muscles straining, heart pounding. The plane responded, scraping past the ridge by mere feet. He exhaled slowly, glancing at Emma. Small, fragile, 11 years old, and somehow carrying the weight of the mission with unflinching precision. "We've cleared the worst," she said calmly, though Mason could see the tension behind her eyes. "Now we navigate the upper valley. Wind direction shifting, head east, adjust altitude slightly. There's a cleared corridor through the trees." Mason nodded. The corridor below was barely visible, a narrow path through snow-laden trees. One slip, and the aircraft could collide with frozen branches. He followed Emma's guidance carefully, trusting her calculations completely. "Altitude 20,000 feet. Reduce speed to 130 knots, she instructed. "Maintain heading 345. Gust correction in 3, 2, 1. The aircraft shuddered violently, but Mason maintained control. The plane slid carefully through the corridor, snow and ice flaring along the fuselage. He glanced at Emma again. She was extraordinary, not just brave, but skilled beyond her years. "Visibility dropping fast," she warned. "The bus and rescue team are navigating toward the clearing below. We need to ensure we maintain their line of sight. Adjust heading slightly left. Maintain altitude." Mason followed her instructions. The valley stretched ahead, ice-covered trees lining the slopes. The children below were moving along the cleared path, guided by the rescue team. Every second mattered. The storm wasn't relenting. Final stretch before base, Emma said. We'll ascend gradually after this ridge. Gusts will peak, but I've calculated the timing. Follow my lead exactly. Mason's heart raced. The aircraft trembled violently as a massive gust hit from the west. He fought the controls, feeling the plane tilt dangerously, snow pelting the windshield like shards of glass. Then, Emma's voice cut through. Throttle increase 2%. Correct bank 1.5 degrees left. Hold altitude. The plane stabilized. Mason exhaled, chest heaving. He had flown through worse storms, but never with the responsibility of guiding a child's life and dozens of others simultaneously. Emma, he said quietly, awe in his voice, I've flown for decades. I've handled wildfires, hurricanes, combat zones, but nothing prepared me for this. She glanced at him briefly. I just want the kids to be safe. That's all that matters. Minutes later, the aircraft emerged above the worst of the storm. The snow began to thin slightly, the wind easing as they approached safer airspace. Mason allowed himself a brief sigh of relief. Base in sight, Emma said. We've navigated the storm. The children are safe. The rescue team has the gear. Mason shook his head in amazement. The small girl beside him had guided them through near-impossible conditions, through gusts, ice, lightning, and microbursts, all while keeping the mission alive. You did it, he said. You actually did it. You saved lives today, Emma. Not just the kids, everyone on that mountain owes you their thanks. Emma's face softened into a faint smile. I did what I had to do. Mom would done the same. Mason exhaled slowly, looking out over the mountains and the clearing below. The storm had been relentless, but hope had returned. They had made it through. Lives had been saved. Courage, skill, and determination had carried them through the impossible. And Mason knew one truth he would never forget. Bravery has no age. Purpose can be found in the smallest hands. And sometimes the fiercest courage comes from those who are least expected to wield it. The aircraft leveled off, engines humming steadily. Mason glanced at Emma, feeling a deep respect and admiration for the child beside him. She had faced the storm, faced the mountains, and faced the impossible, and she had won. For a brief moment the storm seemed almost still, as if acknowledging the triumph of courage and skill. Mason realized that today he had not just flown a mission, he had witnessed a hero in the making. And that hero was 11 years old. The school bus appeared through the snow like a dark speck on a frozen ribbon of road. The children inside huddled together, eyes wide with fear and wonder. Mason Hale's heart pounded in his chest. They had survived the storm, navigated treacherous ridges, and delivered critical supplies. But the final challenge remained, guiding the bus safely to the emergency strip. Every decision now had to be precise, every instruction flawless. Bus visual, sir, Emma said, eyes locked on the radar and the line of moving headlights below. They're following the path I mapped. One misstep and the snow drifts could trap them again. I'll guide you to keep their line of sight clear. Mason nodded, gripping the yoke. The storm had eased slightly, but gusts still rattled the aircraft violently. Visibility was poor. Ice clung stubbornly to the wings. One wrong maneuver could push the plane off course and doom the rescue. Adjust heading 2 degrees left, Emma instructed. Maintain altitude 20,000 feet. Gusts from the west in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Correct now. The aircraft responded, tilting slightly, then stabilizing. Mason exhaled slowly, feeling the incredible precision of Emma's guidance. He glanced at her, realizing again that this child was orchestrating a near-impossible rescue with unmatched skill. They're moving, sir, Emma continued. The children are following the route. Keep engines steady. Don't let turbulence push you off the corridor. The plane shuddered as a gust slammed into them. Mason's knuckles whitened. The icy wind rattled the fuselage like a percussion instrument. Emma, you've got eyes everywhere. I can't believe it. She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the radar, calculating angles, speed, and drift. "We have to anticipate the next microburst. Heading 345, maintain climb 10 feet. Correct rudder 1.5 degrees right now." Mason obeyed instantly. The aircraft tilted violently, snow blinding the cockpit, but then leveled smoothly. The bus below inched forward along the cleared path, headlights flickering in the storm's remnants. "They're halfway to the clearing," Emma said. "Keep engines steady. Don't overcompensate for the gusts. Follow my lead exactly." Minutes stretched into eternity. Mason guided the plane with all the skill he had accumulated over decades, but he relied on Emma's calculations for every move. She was small, yes, 11 years old, but her mind operated like the most precise co-pilot he had ever flown with. "Final stretch," Emma said. "They're approaching the last curve. Gusts ahead, microbursts. Adjust pitch 2 degrees down. Bank 1.8 degrees left." The aircraft responded. Mason felt the plane tremble violently as wind buffeted them, snow hammering the fuselage. Lightning forked above, illuminating the frozen mountains. He exhaled slowly. The bus was in sight, approaching the emergency strip. "They see us," Emma said. "The children know where to go. Keep heading steady. They need to align with the clearing exactly. Don't deviate." Mason obeyed, sweat beading his brow. The corridor was narrow, flanked by snowdrifts and ice-laden trees. One miscalculation could push the bus off path. But Emma's guidance was flawless, anticipating every gust, every slope, every potential hazard. "Clear the last curve," she instructed. "Throttle steady, altitude steady, rudder minor correction 1/2 degree right. They're almost there." The bus rounded the curve, headlights illuminating the snow-covered clearing. Mason's heart leapt. They had done it. The children were moving safely toward the strip. But the storm wasn't finished. A sudden gust slammed into the aircraft, tilting it dangerously. Mason fought the yoke. "Correct now," Emma shouted. "Rudder 1.2 degrees left, nose level, hold." The aircraft responded. Mason exhaled, glancing at Emma. Small, determined, unshakable, she had guided them through every obstacle, every microburst, every icy gust. The children below were safe because of her. "They're at the clearing," Emma said calmly, though Mason could see the tension behind her eyes. "Now, sir, we ensure they can offload safely. I've calculated a glide path to keep them aligned with the landing zone." Mason nodded. The aircraft descended carefully, snow whipping past the windshield, engines humming steadily. The bus followed the mapped route perfectly, reaching the emergency strip without incident. The rescue team moved swiftly, guiding the children to safety. "Packages delivered?" Mason asked, glancing at Emma. "All accounted for," she said. "Thermal kits, beacons, medical supplies, everything." Mason shook his head in disbelief. He had flown countless emergency missions, but this was unlike anything he had ever done. And the person responsible for the mission's success wasn't a seasoned adult pilot, it was an 11-year-old girl. "Emma, you just saved lives today," he said softly, awe in his voice. "Not just the kids, everyone here. You're incredible." She looked at him, a faint smile on her face. "I did what I had to do, sir. Mom would done the same. I just wanted to make sure they all made it." The storm had calmed slightly, though snow still swirled around them. Mason allowed himself a slow exhale. The emergency mission was complete. The children were safe, the bus had reached the clearing, and the rescue team could take over. As they taxied away from the strip, Mason looked at Emma with deep respect. She had navigated impossible conditions, guided the bus safely, and maintained a level of focus and precision that belief. "You're a hero," he said quietly. "I don't care how old you are a hero." Emma's smile widened faintly, though she didn't seem to grasp the magnitude of her achievement. "I just wanted to help," she said simply. Mason shook his head. "Helping? You just executed the most precise rescue mission I've ever seen. You kept an entire bus of children alive in a storm that would have stopped most adults in their tracks. You saved lives today. Don't underestimate that. She looked down at her tablet, tapping lightly. I just followed the path. I just did what I had to do. Mason exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of pride, relief, and awe. The storm had been merciless, the mountains unforgiving, but Emma had been relentless, calm, and precise. She had faced the impossible and succeeded. As the plane leveled off, engines humming steadily, Mason glanced at the clearing below. The children were safe. The bus was offloaded. The rescue team was coordinating the next steps, and in the cockpit beside him sat a girl who had age, fear, and the storm itself. Today, Mason said quietly, you've shown me something I'll never forget. Courage doesn't come from age, skill doesn't come from size, and heroism comes from heart, determination, and focus. You have all of that, Emma, all of it. She looked at him, eyes wide, processing his words. Then slowly a small, proud smile appeared. And now, Mason said with a weary grin, we get back home. The aircraft ascended, leaving the emergency strip behind. Snow still swirled around them, gusts raking the fuselage, but the worst was behind. The mission was nearly complete. Emma leaned back, hands resting lightly on her tablet, finally allowing herself a moment to breathe. The storm had tested them, the mountains had challenged them, and the impossible had been accomplished. For Mason Hale, the veteran pilot, one thing was clear. He had flown with a prodigy, a hero, and a child whose courage and skill would stay with him for the rest of his life. The Bitterroot Mountains slowly disappeared beneath a thinning veil of clouds as Mason Hale guided the aircraft towards safer skies. Snow still whipped around the fuselage, but the storm's fury had eased. The emergency had been met, the children were safe, and the impossible mission had been accomplished. And yet Mason's heart still raced, not from danger but from awe. Beside him, Emma Lane sat quietly, her small hands resting lightly on the tablet, eyes scanning instruments as though expecting another emergency. You did it, Emma, Mason said softly. All of it. You guided us through the storm, saved lives, and kept a level head that most adults couldn't even imagine. Emma shifted slightly, looking at him with a small, almost shy smile. I just did what I had to do, sir. Mason shook his head, smiling in disbelief. You don't understand. What you did was extraordinary. I've flown for decades, handled emergencies that would terrify most pilots, but I've never flown with anyone like you. You are something else. Emma's eyes flickered with pride, though she still seemed uncertain. It was scary, she admitted quietly, but the kids, I had to save them. And save them you did, Mason replied. Every single one. You kept the bus on course, guided the rescue team, and calculated wind, ice, and turbulence like a seasoned pilot. You've got skills that most adults would envy and courage beyond belief. Emma's lips curved into a faint smile. Mom always said the sky is honest. You get no second chances. I just remembered what she taught me. Mason nodded. The wisdom behind her words resonated deeply. The mountains, the storm, and the frozen corridors had been merciless. And yet, Emma had faced them with clarity, precision, and a courage no one expected from someone her age. The aircraft leveled as they approached a safe descent corridor. Mason guided the plane carefully, trusting her continued input. We'll land at the regional airstrip in 10 minutes. The rescue team is already coordinating transport for the children. And Emma, once we land, people will want to meet you. They'll want to know the girl who saved lives during a mountain storm. Emma's eyes widened slightly. Really? Mason chuckled softly. Absolutely. And I hope they understand just how incredible you are. You earned every bit of recognition coming your way. The radio crackled. Hail flight clearance granted for approach. Winds at 20 knots, visibility improving. You are cleared to land. Emergency teams ready on the tarmac. Roger that, Mason replied. He glanced at Emma. Ready. Emma nodded firmly. Ready, let's do it right. The plane descended steadily, engines humming smoothly as Mason aligned with the runway. Snow had accumulated along the edges, but the surface was clear enough. He followed Emma's guidance for final alignment, her small voice calling out each adjustment with remarkable precision. 2 degrees left, maintain nose level, reduce speed slowly. Watch gusts on the left, slight correction right rudder. The aircraft glided over the runway, wheels touching down with a gentle thud. Mason exhaled slowly, guiding the plane along the tarmac. Emma's voice continued to direct him until the aircraft came to a complete stop near the emergency response vehicles waiting at the edge. They had made it. Every life saved, every calculation perfect, every second of terror now behind them. Mason felt a rare moment of quiet triumph wash over him. "Everyone is safe," Emma said, scanning the instruments one last time. "The children are secure. The rescue team has control." Mason turned to her, eyes filled with awe. "Emma, you've just completed one of the most extraordinary missions I've ever witnessed. You guided me, the plane, and an entire rescue operation through a storm that could have killed us all. And you did it calmly, precisely, and bravely. You are a hero." Emma looked down, cheeks flushing slightly. I just wanted to help, that's all." Mason smiled. "Helping? You didn't just help, you saved lives. You made the impossible possible. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The emergency team rushed toward the bus, guiding the children to warmth, blankets, and medical attention. The children waved toward the aircraft, some recognizing the small girl who had orchestrated their survival. Emma gave a shy wave, a hint of pride in her expression, but no words. Her modesty never allowed her to take full credit. Mason watched, heart swelling. He had flown with the best, faced storms, disasters, and impossible scenarios, but never had he witnessed courage, skill, and determination so pure and unshakable in someone so young. "Come on," he said, gesturing to Emma. "Let's get you on the ground. People are going to want to meet the hero of the day." Emma nodded, stepping carefully down the aircraft stairs. The crisp mountain air hit her face, but the fear and tension of the mission had dissipated. She looked at Mason. "Do you think I did okay?" "You did more than okay," he said firmly. "You were brilliant, fearless, and precise. The kids, the rescue team, and everyone watching will never forget what you did. Neither will I." The emergency team and local authorities surrounded them, clapping and cheering. Parents rushed toward the children, hugging and comforting them. Then, cameras and reporters noticed the small figure who had led the mission. "Who is she?" one officer asked, looking at Emma. Mason stepped forward, proud. "This," he said, gesturing to Emma, "is the 11-year-old Copilot who saved 22 children today. She guided the plane through a storm that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. She's brave, skilled, and extraordinary. Her name is Emma Lane, and she is a hero." Emma blushed, eyes wide. She wasn't used to praise, but the smiles around her reflected gratitude, relief, and admiration. She had saved lives, faced fear, and emerged victorious. A parent approached, tears in her eyes. "You saved my child," she said softly. Emma nodded, unable to find the words. "You did more than I could ever imagine," Mason whispered. "And you did it with courage most adults can't claim. Remember that." As the sun began to break through the clouds, illuminating the snow-covered mountains, Emma finally allowed herself a deep breath. The storm had passed. The mission had ended. Lives had been saved. And an 11-year-old girl had proven, beyond any doubt, that courage, skill, and determination could defy age, expectation, and even the fiercest storm. Mason Hale watched her, knowing he had witnessed something extraordinary that day, something he would never forget. "Ready to go home?" he asked gently. Emma nodded, a small, proud smile on her face. "Ready." And with that, they walked toward the waiting rescue team, the mountain storm behind them, and the knowledge that a hero had been born amidst the snow, wind, and ice. The sky was honest indeed. and Emma Lane had proven herself worthy.